Okay, good evening everyone, and thank you for being here today for this webinar. Thank you to the participants who are connected, and thank you to the panelists. I am Stefania Romenti, and I have the honor of being president of EUPRERA, the association that is organizing this webinar today. EUPRERA brings together scholars and of public relations and corporate communication, and therefore, thanks to the work and the energy of its members who always organize webinars, the annual conference, and research networks, that the association can monitor trends in the field of communication. Since last year, we organized 8 webinars attended by 140 people and with more than 500 views on YouTube. We met in Vienna for the annual congress, which was attended by 180 people. So we want to replicate this success and the opportunities again this year. Today, that's the second webinar, and we will shortly introduce the moderator and the panelists. But before, I want to remind you that there are more webinars ahead, for example, on Horizon and on the brand new publications. So click on Keep Me Posted on our webinars page to be sure to receive the next invitations. While the next annual conference, to which you are all invited, will be held in Prague, hosted by the Charles University on September 2023, on the topic Communicating Responsibility or Responsible Communication. I therefore want to thank Martina Topic, behavioral sociologist and mass communication scholar at Leeds Beckett University, first of all because she is the leader of a very fruitful network, Women in PR. Martina will today be coordinating this webinar entitled EQ for Strategic Communication, a focus on women in leadership, with academic colleagues and professionals. Last but not least, I kindly remind you to fill the very brief survey you will receive after the webinar. Thank you again to everyone, and I wish you a pleasant webinar. And I leave the floor to Martina to introduce the team and the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you for a lovely introduction, Stefania. I'm very happy to be here and work with EUPRERA, as I always have been. I'm pleased to introduce today's webinar, Emotional Intelligence for Strategic Communication, with some focus on women in leadership. We have two speakers. One is Ilaria, who is an education and community manager in 6 Seconds Europe. And the other one is Gabrielle, or Gabby, who is a lecturer in marketing at Leeds Beckett University. And as Stefania said, I am Martina Topic. I'm a reader at Leeds Beckett University. So today we will have 3 short presentations. And then I have a few questions I'm going to ask our 2 participants to comment and answer to start the discussion. But we certainly welcome comments from the audience, which we will aim to address and answer as soon as they come. So I'll try to coordinate the discussion of the panel and also the comments. Now, I would like to invite Ilaria to start with her very interesting presentation and her work for 6 Seconds Europe on emotional intelligence.
Thank you, Martina, and thank you, EUPRERA, for having me today. I'm really excited and grateful for being here with all of you and having the possibility to introduce 6 Seconds and the work that we are doing in the field of emotional intelligence. And this year we turn 25, so it's 25 years of history in emotional intelligence. I don't know if someone can put the slide, upload the slide, so I can work on that. Thank you. So just a few introduction about our organization. 6 Seconds is an international global organization. It's a network. And as you can see, we are present all over the world. We are divided into regions, and that's why I'm in charge of education and community in Europe. And our headquarters in Europe is in Bologna, Italy. And our aim and vision, as you can read on the slide, is really having 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is not theory, but is something, is a skill, is a process that we can all apply every day. And 6 Seconds really tries to do this, equipping individuals and teams with resources, with methodologies and assessments in order to be able to every day use our own emotions and actually making choices and taking decisions at our very best. Probably all of you heard or even studied definitions about emotional intelligence, right? And Peter Salovey, John Mayer, the first psychologists, defined emotional intelligence just like the combination, the blending of thoughts and emotions in order to make optimal decisions. And this at the beginning was actually our definition at 6 Seconds. But then one day, our CEO, Joshua Friedman, had to introduce this concept of emotional intelligence to a classroom of 8-year-old children. And he really thought, well, how can I explain this concept in a very, very easy way? And so he came up with this definition: being smarter with feelings. That actually means to make good use of our emotions, because our emotions are actually data and they are messages that every day we receive. They are neurohormones that our brain releases into our body, and they are sending messages. What is happening when we feel those emotions? One of the most important things that we would love to highlight here is that emotions are not positive or negative, good or bad. As I said, they are useful, not useful. They are serving us. And that's why we should integrate them into our decision and choices. And that's why we will discover today together why they are so relevant in communication, in negotiation, in every kind of relationship, because they support optimal decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I muted myself, so just had to unmute. This was very interesting. I will take questions later when we have this round discussion. We'll try to have it together and with the audience. But now I would like to invite Gabby to present her work, specifically focusing on women and emotional intelligence and skills required to progress to managerial roles.
Perfect. Thank you. Could someone put my slides up, please? There we go. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Gabby Round. I'm a PhD student at Leeds Beckett University under the We Can Women Empowered by Coaching and Network banner. My PhD study is around women, but looking at succession planning, particularly in small, medium enterprises. And it's through this PhD research that the importance of emotional intelligence has really come to the forefront and highlighted how many businesses are failing because of a lack to look for this and appreciate this key skill. So a little bit of background around succession planning, because that's the key area that my PhD focuses on. The majority of organizations fail when it comes to replacing their senior team, be it senior managers or their C-suite, CFOs, CEOs, COOs. The majority of these organizations don't plan for it, or when they do, these plans are poorly created and they don't end up with the right candidate being chosen. This becomes even more of an issue for women because women are least likely to be chosen for these succession roles. Women are more likely to get fair pay when they move organization, but unfortunately, when an external successor is chosen, a male candidate is more likely to be chosen in those scenarios. So it creates an ongoing problem, which is what I'm currently researching. This early research has led me to a systematic literature review, of which I've reviewed the top 10 journals from the fields of HR, business, and accounting and finance to assess and find out, okay, what can we learn about this? From this analysis, it's highlighted that an awful lot of traits and characteristics are considered amazing to actually bring successful successions, and an awful lot of traits are considered looked for or coveted characteristics. And I'm going to show you some of those in the next couple of slides. So the first slide here highlights what those 200 journals from the top 30 in total rated journals have taught us about what makes a good successor. The larger the words on this diagram, the more often they were coming up as proven to create a good choice. And the skills that came out the most strong was so-called soft skills. So emotional intelligence, empathy, integrity. Additionally, emotional intelligence came up on its own. And some of those other key skills, curiosity, creativity, were proven as making those often failed successions more likely to succeed. And the scale of which successions are failing is huge. For example, if just looking at the top 1,500 businesses in the US, $1 trillion is lost every single year based on bad succession decisions. So these are what make a good successor. Now, what's really interesting is the next slide. These are the skills that are actively being looked for in a successor. The top skills that have come up here are things like your network in terms of your social capital, your economic capital, so your proven sales ability, your risk taking, even things like narcissism have come up in what is looked for in a successor. What is important to consider is that none of the skills that make a good successor are also on this list. So of these top journals analyzing what businesses are currently looking for, there is a huge lack of searching for emotional intelligence, of searching for integrity and empathy. And that may well be because difficulty in seeing it in the hiring process. But this is one of the key things that has become a boundary and a barrier for women who are more likely to actively have these traits or hide these traits away when it comes to being chosen as a successor. Interestingly, there are a few traits that make a bad successor. Some of these are also on the looked for list. So that idea of homogenous relationships, so doing the same things, risk taking, that idea of economic capital actually can make a poor succession choice. And none of those so-called soft skills are appearing on this list. So the key takes from this: soft skills such as, or so-called soft skills such as emotional intelligence, empathy, integrity, make brilliant successors, and successions in general are failing. And these skills are not looked for. Really interestingly, all of the journals that highlighted these so-called soft skills came out in the last 20 years. So this was a systematic literature review. It's the earliest piece that I read was from 1978. So we can see a shift in people being aware of the importance here and actually researching it. But it's very alarming that none of these great skills are actively being looked for across this research. And when these organizations are ignoring these emotional intelligence, these so-called soft skills, they are willing failure. They are continuing to fail in these successions. One of the biggest things that happens in organizations, one of the biggest failures. So I want to leave you with a quote from one of those sources that I've read. What is good for gender equality is also good for the economy and good for society as well. So whilst my key motivation to do this PhD and this research is around gender equality and finding that, the fact that this will also help businesses, help the economy and help society is hugely important and often missed. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much for listening. I'll pass you back to Martina.
Thank you, Gabby. That was lovely, as I expected of you. The reason I invited Gabby to this webinar is that if we look at most of, for example, advertising or PR agencies, there are actually agencies and small and medium-sized businesses. So there is a link between her research and this field, and it certainly can inform further research. We have received one lovely comment already, Gabby. Neltia Duplessis tells that it's very interesting and some excellent research. So there is a bit of motivation to completing the PhD. Now just my presentation as last, which is linked to some empirical research I have done.
And sorry, just to interrupt you. I have other slides for the presentation, but I just wanted to give an introduction, Martina, of the organization. That's why I stopped, just for you to know.
Right.
I mean,
would you like to then go next?
No, I don't know, because I have also the data for women and everything, but I thought we were asking the 3 questions, so that's why I was just giving a short introduction of the organization and then answering the 3 questions of the panel. But as you prefer, as you want.
No, go ahead then with your presentation, because I think it's best if I go last with my research.
That's perfect then. Thank you so much. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought we were just answering the questions of the three questions for the panel. Anyway, so just to be connected also with the previous slides, and the role of emotional intelligence in communication, strategic communication, and leadership. One important thing that also our research at 6 Seconds highlighted is that there's a direct correlation between emotional intelligence and the so-called performance, individual performance. And when we talk about performance at 6 Seconds, we define this as a set of success factors. So these 4 success factors are effectiveness, so achieving results, and then relationships, the way we interact with people, and if these relationships are sustainable or not, and then the quality of our life, so if we are satisfied or not, and the well-being. And well-being is emotional, mental, and physical well-being. So our research shows that there's a direct correlation. When people practice more emotional intelligence and EQ skills, this has a direct impact on these 4 outcomes. And that's why we also say that emotions drive people and people drive performance. So everything actually is driven somehow by how we feel. And a way to practice emotional intelligence and try to impact communication, relationship, negotiation is, first of all, trying to feel and understand and name how we feel. So giving a name to our emotions and paying attention to ours and others' emotions before taking a decision, before entering the communication relationship and the leadership dimension. And this is an area of self-awareness where we try to make, as I said at the beginning, good use of our feelings, our emotions. And then there's the area of choice when we communicate with people. What options do we have in interacting with them emotionally also? And what option do they have? And finally, what's important to us and to them to achieve? These are the dynamics, also emotional dynamics, that we all live in communication and in leadership. Do we have common goals when we communicate, when we interact, when we negotiate? If yes, it's important to take our emotions and others' emotions into account. And this means 3 things fundamentally. In know yourself, self-awareness, and asking what am I feeling, is in a way we need to try to expand our emotional vocabulary. Because the more we are able to say, to express our emotions and understanding our and others' emotional patterns, the more effective will be our communication. If Martina today asked me, how are you? And I would have answered, okay, probably she wouldn't have understood really my emotional status. If I said, on the contrary, I feel very excited, I'm also a little bit anxious for technology, never know, and but I'm grateful for being here. Of course, I would have expressed my feelings and also probably my thoughts and my subsequent behaviors in a better way. And the second area is about being able to navigate our emotions and offer alternatives in the communication process, in the relationship as leaders. So offering alternatives and navigating emotions is a way fundamentally to enter the relationship with compassion and care and understanding the other's role, the other's status, and we will see 5 concerns in the end. And finally, absolutely, I can also say that empathy, increasing empathy, is one of the most important skills that we can put in action in negotiation and communication, because empathy is not only putting ourselves in other shoes, but is cognitive empathy. That means I understand your feelings, your emotions in this moment. Emotional empathy, I feel what you are feeling, but not necessarily now, in the sense that I had experience of your feelings, maybe in different situations, but I feel what you feel because I also experienced that. And responsive empathy, so I can do something for you, maybe I can support you in me being a leader or on the other side, and in the way we communicate. I also mentioned the 5 concerns, and Professor Daniel Shapiro identified these 5 concerns in negotiation, but can be extended absolutely to communication and leadership. And so these are, this is a way to put emotional intelligence in practice, means that when we interact, we appreciate, first of all, the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings, and the actions of the other person, of all the stakeholders in the relationship, and we treat them as allies. So there's affiliation. And another important thing is to give them autonomy, so to respect the freedom to choose. And this is not so evident, actually, especially in leadership, especially when we are under pressure, especially when we need to achieve goals and results. And this can happen everywhere, in classrooms, at university, in other business organizations. And then respecting the role and the status of our addressee in our communication and leadership, because also they have a role, and recognizing this creates an environment that is optimal in order to achieve those common goals. And finally, there's this idea that is not only an idea, that our brains are all different, right? So when we interact, our brains can focus in different moments, and also because we are different human beings, maybe on rational data, and maybe more for other people on emotional data. And this can completely change the way we look at things. Maybe I'm hooked when I hear a story, or maybe I'm totally thrilled when I read a chart. Our brain is different, and maybe we take decisions in a different way, so in a more evaluative way, so being analytical, or more innovative. Our brain likes taking risks, more practical or more idealistic. So all of these neuroscientific approaches to our brain are very impactful on our decisions, on the communication, and of course also in leadership. Just a few data. If you want, Martina, I can stop here and then I can say something about women, but if you want, I can continue and just finish this part, if you like.
Please finish.
If you agree.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then I want to reply also to Anka. I think she asked me about resources that we can use in the classroom, absolutely, about emotional intelligence, but especially social and emotional learning. We also had this research called State of the Heart that we released every 3-4 years. And in this case, it's the 2021 State of the Heart, the 6-second State of the Heart. And it was produced during the COVID, the pandemic era, let's say 2019, 20, and 21. And as you can see here, actually what we discovered is that the level of emotional intelligence, more or less, for females and males during those 3 years was more or less the same. But the difference was the impact, for example, on the outcomes. And as you can see, for females, the impact of emotional intelligence on relationships that was quite better than the males is the main difference. The males during the pandemic probably were better in actually being more effective. And there are multiple reasons for that. Of course, we are not here to analyze that, just to present this data, these findings. And same for the quality of life and also for the well-being. And same for the competencies. There was a big difference between females and males in the what we call the 8 competencies for emotional intelligence. And as you can see here, apparently females were practicing more emotional literacy, recognizing pattern, so the emotional patterns, and consequential thinking, the ability of identify causes and consequences in our emotional conditions and when we take decisions and choice. But all the others were lower. So empathy, optimism, pursue a noble goal, navigating emotions, and also intrinsic motivation. Again, there were, and probably we can identify multiple reasons for that. And the last thing that I want to share with you is that during that period inside organization, we also analyzed the difference in female roles in multiple organizations. Could be university, could be business corporations, schools, so wherever women had a role. And we saw that emotional intelligence increased with the role, but in a peculiar way. So, for example, women in senior executive roles, they had a higher ability to navigate their emotions, but a lower, let's say, focus on empathy. So employees and managers, they were more focused on empathy and less on navigating emotions, and vice versa. And same for, especially I want to show you the last on the top, on the bottom right, the way they, in different roles, females focus their decisions. And that chart means that in senior executive roles, females tend to use influence when they take decisions, and employees use more direct contact when they try to negotiate or trying to obtain being effective in their role. So actually there are multiple impacts and consequences of this data, and I was really very, very interested in listening to the previous ones, and definitely we will use them and share with our community, our network in Europe and beyond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I'll do mine now, and then I'll go through the audience questions in the line in which they have been received. So here are my slides. Thank you very much to Maria Grazia, by the way, who is behind the scene managing everything very effectively. Even though you can't see her, she is there. She's omnipresent and she's doing a great job. So as I said before, I'm Martina. I also collaborate with EUPRERA. I lead one project for them, which is now a network. And these are just some findings from that research that I want to very briefly talk about today, including findings from another project. So I didn't study exactly emotional intelligence or empathy in my research, but it's something that came out from findings very strongly. So I will say a little bit about that. So just some definitions very briefly. What is relevant for these findings that I'm going to be mentioning is emotional intelligence in the context of resolving conflicts effectively and responding to co-workers with empathy. This is something that came up very strongly in my findings, and it's one of the core elements of emotional intelligence is to have empathy and also being able to manage your own emotions and recognize emotions of others. So another thing is that this emotional intelligence has 4 components, and then 2 of them, which are also relevant to findings, is reading the room and emotions of others, and then relationship management, so resolving conflict, mentoring, coaching, and influencing others. Leaders, usually, who do not have emotional intelligence, sometimes set the wrong tone for the organization, affect employee turnover, and can create an organizational culture where people do not feel listened to and feel disrespected, which causes stress. And then again, it goes in the circle of employee turnover. It all comes to that, and employee satisfaction, dissatisfaction, well-being, so all these issues. So in terms of findings where empathy features, one of them is a project on women in advertising, and the other one is women in PR. Women in PR obviously is from EUPRERA. So these were larger projects looking at lived experiences, office culture, and then leadership and role models. But here I'll just briefly say about leadership. So among other things, I was looking at how do women lead, and are they role models for other women? And if yes, why? And if not, why not? And I was looking into this in the context of the so-called, or what is stereotypically known as feminine women. So those who have a softer approach to communication and behave in what is usually perceived as feminine, and those who are tomboys, or blokish women, which is a term I use. So those who are more on the masculine side of the way they behave and communicate. And empathy featured in findings, but interestingly, empathy as a skill is not always appreciated, particularly according to participants as well. So in terms of advertising industry, those women who demonstrate feminine leadership styles, for example, they say they have an open door policy, they try to be at the same level as employees, they are approachable, they are friendly, in their behavior, and they're compassionate communicators. But then you also, at the same time, they say there is a catch-22. So if I'm too nice, I'm not seen as a manager material, but if I'm too tough, then I'm seen, and I'm quoting this, as a bitch. So I apologize for the language, but I wanted to quote directly. So they're basically saying, we demonstrate these soft leadership skills, we demonstrate empathy, we try to understand and be friendly towards our employees and create a friendly culture, but this is not always appreciated, and you sometimes have to be assertive. That's also a value that they say is appreciated in the organizations. And then on the other hand, in terms of tomboy or blokish women, they say they are tough, direct, but showing trust and giving people freedom as well. So I developed this typology, which is published in Journal of Communications Management very recently, actually. It's based on 41 qualitative interviews. It's not a quantitative study, so it's just a suggestion for further research. What came up from findings is that these women who work more with masculine meanings and masculine behavioral and communication styles are more likely to become a manager. They have better relationship with male employees, have a masculine leadership style, and as employees prefer male managers. They are not a role model for other women and demonstrate characteristics such as boldness, risk-taking, transparency, have high expectation of employees, which is not always appreciated by employees as well, and a direct communication style, as opposed to feminine women who face some hardship in becoming managers, face catch-22, if they have a feminine leadership style, they are not always seen as suitable to be leaders. They prefer female managers, and they are often role models for women employees because they're open-minded, friendly, able to listen, and empathetic as well. And they're supportive of employees, and they exercise a considerate communication style. So in public relations, also very, very similar findings. So women who demonstrate these feminine skills, or what is usually considered as feminine, obviously not women are like that. Again, building relationships, working well in groups, being relaxed, understanding, building trust, approachable, open doors policy. But they say they feel the need to be more assertive to succeed. So basically tone down on empathy and friendliness and be a bit more pushy, which is exactly what these tomboy women say, that they are pushy, they push people, they're direct, open, honest, no tolerance for fools attitude, and setting the bar high. I put some direct quotes. I don't know why my slides converted to red. I wasn't aware of that, that's going to happen. So I'm sorry about that. And also catch-22 in public relations. Too soft, not a manager. Too tough, that's a problem. Again. So what they are saying, you're not a pushover just because you're being empathetic with somebody. We should be empathetic. We shouldn't actually be hiding our emotion and our friendliness. Empathy is something that should be seen as a value, and we should be flexible, but it is not always appreciated. So if we look at empathy as a stereotypically woman's skill, because this is also what you will find in the literature, that women are seen as having more empathy, it's part of emotional intelligence, but it's not always recognized as a manager material. If you have a lot of empathy, you're seen as a bit soft and you're not assertive enough. And then as a result, very often only masculine women go ahead. So those who are very tough, very aggressive, very assertive. And just to finish off with a quote from Eleanor Mills, the former editor-in-chief of the Sunday Times. She said that some of the women who do remain in senior positions become so blockified by the macho water in which they swim that many younger women looking up don't see them as a role model for the kind of woman they may want to become. And this was the case in my findings in both advertising and PR, that women who don't show empathy as one of the characteristics are not often seen as role model, and women say, well, I might as well just work for a man. So that's all from me, very, very briefly. And we can take now some questions from the audience. So first and foremost, Neltia, good evening to you from Leeds as well. Thank you for your greeting and for a lovely compliment for Gabby. This first question is for Ilaria from Anka Anton about classroom resources for teaching emotional intelligence, asking, would it be possible to have access to some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So our organization, first of all, organizes courses, certifications for both educators, teachers, professors, but also, as said, other leaders, managers, employees, wherever, in whatever organizations. On our website, there are also free resources. So I don't know if anyone can type in the chat or send the link, but it's 6seconds.org, 6 with a 6.org/education. And in there you can find a lot of resources, even ebook that you can download, and all the sections about also the assessments that we use in order to measure emotional intelligence and all the EQ skills and the outcomes, and that we use with adults and youth at university, in schools, as social and emotional learning. So there's plenty of resources, and if you are interested, absolutely you can send me an email and I will share with you even more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have the link now. Someone from EUPRERA posted it, I presume Maria Grazia.
Thank you.
The next question is also from Anka for Gabby. So Anka is asking, can you tell us if the literature you reviewed took into consideration certain geographical spaces, and are the results focused on specific countries?
Yeah, perfect question. So the literature review used Scamago's H rating, and I used the top 10 journals by H rating on the fields of finance, business and management, and human resources. Now, the majority or all of those top rated journals were very Western. So they were US, Europe, UK. So there was a skew towards that. However, some of those journals were doing research in other geographic areas. So some of the literature was on China, there was some on Africa, there was a few various other, but the majority of it was very Western centric, which is a little bit of a limitation of using that method. The next steps of my PhD is to take it into my own primary research, which will be focused on the UK, to consider whether it's the same there, and then see if we can start there to make some improvements.
Okay, thank you. We have another one for you, Gabby, so you are not off yet. Raluca Mo is asking, did you also look into the role that emotional intelligence plays in internal promotion for leadership positions, and how you can record or evidence emotional intelligence in your own leadership activity?
Yeah, okay. So internal positions is a really interesting one. So women generally stand better chances at being promoted internally. Perhaps not better than their male counterparts, but better than they stand externally from this research. And perhaps that's because they have more of an opportunity to show some of these skills in the working environment. That would be a bit of an assumption at this point. But yeah, the internal versus external did come through quite heavily in that research. A number of the sources highlighted that actually internal promotion is the key to success. But as a lot of what I'm focused on is small, medium enterprises, they don't always have the number of staff to do that. And the second part of the question, how can you evidence your own emotional intelligence in your leadership activity? Well, that's sort of where I'm going next in my research, to find out, is there a better way that we can do the hiring process? Is there a better way that we can set decision makers on boards, incumbent CEOs up to make the right decisions? So right now, I don't necessarily have that answer. Ilaria might have that answer. But from my research, that's the next step for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
actually, yes, Gabby, thank you, because there are a lot of CEOs or managers inside organizations, but again, also schools and the university, that they use assessments, for example, instead of only assessments for technical competencies or also soft skills competence, but they can use emotional intelligence assessments. And so in this case, you can identify how emotional intelligence impacts your leadership and your style of leadership. And so this is something that can be measured. Of course, they are self-assessment. And so validated, of course, but in any case, they are seen as starting points where then you can work on your emotional intelligence and leadership, because you start from a measurement and you can recognize, that, yeah, I'm functional in this area, I can improve, how to improve. Of course, then there are methodology, techniques, and practices that we can put in action.
Okay, I do have now some questions for the two of you, which I think you will answer very effectively. I can guess already. So, how does emotional intelligence support strategic communication and leadership in your view? And I'll start with you, Ilaria.
So, as I shared at the beginning, this is exactly what our research also shows, because the more we, for example, expand our vocabulary in terms of emotions, the more we use intentional empathy, the more we use optimism, that means offering alternatives, the more we navigate our emotions while we communicate. This all has impact on leadership. And we can practical examples, but when we interact maybe with our collaborators or even with colleagues, and we are leaders of a project, right? If we want to have the maximum results, we definitely can obtain that when we establish a sustainable relationship. And a sustainable relationship is based fundamentally, we believe, on trust. And trust is one of the primary emotions. I don't know if you know the Plutchik wheel, and this Plutchik was an American psychologist, and he identified 8 primary emotions, and one of these is trust. And trust is, again, an emotion, but is absolutely something that we use in with emotional intelligence, right? And so this can definitely improve using all these skills to improve leadership and the way we lead people.
Okay, Gabby, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. But I would also add that emotional intelligence allows us to bring in other people's feelings and thoughts. That empathy allows us to take on board what others are doing and thinking and feeling. And actually, it's proven that a diverse board or a diverse group of managers makes better business decisions when they are more able to take on the opinions and thoughts of others, which is why emotional intelligence will help so greatly with strategic communication, because it opens up that diverse thought.
Okay, thank you. I do agree with both of you. And also, just to add, if we look at who the consumers are, or the readers of the media, or publics of public relations, a lot of them are actually women. So if we have only one gender communicating, it doesn't always convey the same message. And there are studies, for example, showing that this can be a problem. So it's very interesting. I see a question from Anka as well for me, asking that I mentioned that blockish women managers were not perceived as role models by other women, and feminine women managers were perceived as role models. Was that their perception or the perception of the colleagues or employees? Well, it's actually both. So when I asked women who demonstrated these blockish characteristics, which I've also done in my research, whether they see themselves as role model, the majority said no. But then also when I was speaking with women employees and asked them to describe their manager and asked what's the gender of the manager, if it was a woman and if it was described as a blockish woman, then they said no, I'd much rather work for a man than for a very tough woman. Were they in more masculine or feminine environments? It's both. I interviewed in-house and agencies, and there is those which are more masculine, more feminine mixture. It came across all data, basically. So that's the answer to Anka's question, and thank you for asking. It's actually very interesting. I can't fit in all data into a tiny presentation, so I'm actually quite pleased. I wanted to ask next question to our speakers as well. Do you have any practical recommendations for strategic communications and industries, and also for strategic communication leaders, Ilaria?
So yeah, I just if I can put up maybe my last slide where I recap a little bit let's say six. Thank you. Six ideas. Six because we are 6 seconds, right? So again, in a way, it's a recap of what I presented. So the practical things that we can do as leaders in strategic communication. But again, this is valid for all kind of communications and all kind of negotiations and relationships. Again, the first recommendation for all of us is really try to expand our emotional vocabulary. So increase the number of words that we know about emotions and name them, recognize them and name them. And then the second one, as I shared with you, and I love Daniel Shapiro and his 5 concern, be concerned. So recognize in the relationship and in the communication that that other people are allies, and also our language should be realigned to that. If they are allies, let's use more and instead of but, for example, and share more I messages, so saying, oh, I feel like that. I would love your support, right? So let's try to recognize allies, recognize and appreciate emotions, thoughts, and actions, the role, the status of other people. And then, as Gabby said, increase empathy. And again, cognitive, emotional, and especially responsive empathy. So in order to understand, feel, but especially support be there to support. And it doesn't mean to solve every kind of issues, but just be there in order to ask the question and say, can I do something in this relationship to achieve our common goal? Expect different brain styles, as we were saying. So also in this case, our organization can identify multiple brain styles. And when we know how our brain works, then we can also interact accordingly, right? Because we can, as professors, as teachers, as educators, as leaders, if we know in our classroom, our students, the great majority, maybe they are more focused on emotional data, maybe we will use more videos, more stories in order to engage them. And finally, my recommendation for us all is to practice EQ. Because again, practice means really every day asking ourselves, what am I feeling? What options do I have? What can I do? What is important to me? And put in action empathy, vocabulary, optimism, and all the rest. And so every day, if we can.
Thank you. And Gabby, what would you say is a practical recommendation for strategic communication industries and strategic communication leaders?
Yeah, so for me, it would be two things: spread the word and break the stereotypes. So move away from those harmful stereotypes that a brilliant leader is domineering and a confident speaker first and foremost and has economic capital behind them, or it exists in a homogenous network. Those things are harmful and are not bringing us equality or success. So by breaking those stereotypes and spreading the word about it and showing that actually emotional intelligence is hugely important and will create better outcomes for equality, for economy, and for society is the only practical solution I could give, really. And think outside the box, I guess, in terms of your hiring practices or who you're working with.
That's really interesting. I could also add just what I've added actually in the paper, one of the papers I published, and that's that I think it's also a HR issue. So human resources should pay attention not just to these formal structures, because we do have equality laws in many countries. Certainly in the UK, where our research is based, we have equality law. We have all these positive initiatives, but sometimes it's this informal structure that actually affects people's job satisfaction, people's career progression. I'm sorry, speaking too long online. So what I've put as a recommendation in one of the papers is actually that HR policies should look into these informal structures and try to regulate them a little bit within each organization, so that it's not those who are like us that progress. So, if there is a man in power, he will take a masculine woman or a man, or equally, if it's a masculine woman, they tend to also prefer men, so that we do appreciate this diversity a little bit more as well. Very interesting. Anka also says that we are all doing a wonderful research. So thank you, Anka. And are there any other questions maybe from the audience? We do have a few more minutes left. Thank you, Raluca, for your feedback. That's much appreciated. If we don't have any more questions or comments, then I would like to thank everyone for joining us this evening from Europe, from Africa as well, South Africa. So thank you very much for that. I know we are all in different time zones, and your attention and attendance and these questions were much appreciated.
Thank you also from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been really interesting and great to be part of. Thanks.